Hi everybody, welcome to ENbreezEN, the current affairs session by Team Enlight. Today, we'll go over 4 topics which are listed here. Please have a look. The first topic for the day is women in judiciary. It was in news because CGI had recently remarked that 50% reservation for women is not a charity but rather a right. So first we'll see some facts related to participation of women in Indian judiciary. So according to statistics, women constitute only about 30% of the lower judiciary, 11.5% in high courts, and 12% of the Supreme Court. This is regarding the number of judges in each of these judicial courts. Of India's 1.7 million advocates, only 15% are women. So these stats can be used as introduction to our mains answers, if at all a question arises in GS2 paper. Now we'll see what are the difficulties faced by women in judiciary, which was remarked by the CGI. The first among them is the gender stereotypes, which forces women to bear responsibilities for the family as well, because the care work of the house will mostly be assigned to women due to gender stereotyping, which means that the women has to bear more, or which forces them to bear the responsibilities of family along with their professional career. Apart from that, it is noticed that there is a preference for male advocates from the side of clients as well. Another very important factor is the uncomfortable environment that the women have in the court complexes, which includes a lack of infrastructure, which includes lack of proper sanitation facilities for women, lack of washrooms, lack of creches, as well as crowded courtrooms. So all these makes it difficult for women to participate actively in judiciary. Another point is that a lot of female judges join the service very late, which makes their chance of making it to the High Courts or Supreme Court very bleak, because qualifications of High Court and Supreme Court mandates that there should be at least a continuous period of time wherein an advocate or a judge should be part of either the High Court, a District Court, or a Supreme Court. Now, another point is to be eligible to be a district judge and advocate must have a minimum of 7 years, which this was the same point which was remarked earlier, because the Supreme Court had mandated that there should be a continuous practice for elevating a particular advocate as a district judge. So this would be a disqualifying criteria for many women because of the social responsibilities like marriage and motherhood. Moving on, we'll see some measures which we can take to improve the participation of women. Let's see some measures. The first one is the change in patriarchal mindset that we have while appointing women judges to the courts. The next possible solution is to fill the existing vacancies. We all know that there are a huge amount of vacancies in Indian judiciary. So if we can appoint more women judges, it will obviously increase the participation of women in judiciary. The next point which was remarked by CGI is that of National Judicial Infrastructure Corporation, which will ensure an inclusive design of court complexes. The difficulties faced by the women, which we mentioned earlier, like the poor sanitation facilities, can be mitigated by having a National Judicial Infrastructure Corporation to look into designing inclusive court complexes. The next is many states have a reservation policy for women in lower judiciary, which is missing in high courts and Supreme Courts. So some affirmative action in that respect can also be taken to improve the participation. Another important factor is the gender sensitization training. So it is not enough that the participation of women in judiciary is improved, but then we need to provide with gender sensitization training to women judges as well as male judges as well. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is dark energy. So this is relevant only in prelims respect. That too, it is only necessary to understand what is dark energy. But dark energy has been the most profound mystery in all of science. So there are only less evidences regarding dark energy, or the understanding about dark energy is pretty less as of now. So we'll just see what is dark energy based on present understanding. So dark energy is the name given to the mysterious force that is causing the rate of expansion of our universe to accelerate over time. We all know that the universe is expanding. So the energy or the force which is behind this expansion of universe is attributed to the dark energy, or rather it is called dark energy. Why was it in news? It was because a xenon 1T experiment which is the world's most sensitive dark matter experiment and was operated in deep underground at some observatory in Italy. They had provided some evidence of dark energy recently. We'll see what our universe is made up of next, which is what we see around. The planets, moons, and galaxies make up only 5% of the universe, while 27% is the dark matter, while 68% is the dark energy. The statistics is not that important, but then it is good to understand at least the approximate amount of dark energy, dark matter, and proper matter in whole of universe. So while dark matter attracts and holds galaxies together, dark energy repels and causes the expansion of universe. So the only possible question here is, there can be a statement that dark matter causes the expansion of universe, which is wrong. It is in fact the dark energy which repels and causes the expansion of our universe. Moving on, we'll see some aspects of left-wing extremism. What are the causes? What are the measures which are already in place to tackle left-wing extremism in the country? Left-wing extremism, or Naxalism as it is called, it is a doctrine to capture state power through combination of insurgency, which almost or often involves violent actions like bomb blast or improved explosive devices attack, etc. And this movement has its origin in the Naxalbari district in West Bengal, or that is why it is called Naxalism in India. So it has its philosophical basis in Mao, wherein the peasants, landless laborers, Adivasis, which are the tribes, the concerns of them are raised by the Naxalism or Naxals, but rather it is not through a democratic manner, but rather through violent actions against the state. So what is the present condition, or what is the present status of left-wing extremism? It will be good to draw a map when such a question is being asked. A map is being shown here. The map is from the year 2018 and it is taken from ORF. So if we can draw a map and mark the districts where Naxalism or left-wing extremism is very high, it will be good and it will add value to the answer. So such important states where it is being seen is listed here. Important among them is the Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, as well as parts of Maharashtra. Now, what are the causes? There are a plethora of causes, but major factor is the socio-economic factors, which makes it vulnerable to Naxalism or Naxals. So large sections of population live below poverty, especially in these districts where it has been marked, which makes them vulnerable. And in fact, there is extreme inequalities of income in the society, large-scale unemployment, and there is a neglect of land reforms. So majority of the land is under some particular persons, and for farmers or tribal farmers or tribes, lands are not available, or rather several acts like the PESA Act has not been implemented properly, which is the point of poor state of governance. And there has been also instances of rampant corruption being reported in the states, which makes the tribals feeling disaffected, and they are moved towards or forced to move towards movements like Naxalism. This was the map being shown, and the present status as seen by this bar diagram. You can see that roughly it is reducing. There is no need to remember the stats. It's not possible practically, but then it is good to know the trend that it is reducing from 2009 to 2020. And if you can draw this roughly in the answer, it will also add value to the answer. So there is a stat given. If you can remember, it will be good. Otherwise also it's fine. So geographical influence of Maoist has contracted to only 41 districts in the country from 96 districts in 2010. This is according to the Ministry of Home Affairs, who deals with tackling Naxalism in the country. So we'll see some measures which are already in place. So the policy measure is National Policy and Action Plan, which is in place till 2015. So it introduces a two-pronged approach to tackle Naxalism. One is zero tolerance towards violence, and the next step is the push towards developmental activities. There are various measures to improve our security infrastructure. Some of them are shown here. Please take a look. The important one among them is the modernization of police force scheme, or special infrastructure scheme for modernization and training of state police. There are, as we mentioned, development is important. In fact, it is the lack of development which forces the people to move towards Naxal movement. So education is important for that. For providing quality education to youth, we have Egalavya model residential schools in these areas, and we have a Samadhan doctrine by the central government for tackling left-wing extremism. And for improving the infrastructure, we have specialized battalion. One is called as Cobra, which is a Central Reserve Police Force battalion, and each state which we saw, like Chhattisgarh or Andhra Pradesh, has their own specialized forces. The famous among them is Andhra Pradesh's Greyhounds Force. And many of the states like West Bengal or Odisha has attractive surrender and rehabilitation package, and we read in news frequently that certain Naxal groups or Maoist groups has surrendered to the government or police force. And another important factor is installation of mobile towers, because it is the lack of communication. Because of the terrain, it is important that we have this step, which is the installation of mobile towers, so that the government can reach the people and provide them with adequate welfare measures. So this was the Samadhan doctrine, which was told earlier. There is no need to study. It will be difficult to study all these, what each letter stands for, but then it is good to remember of Samadhan doctrine. We have a specific doctrine, which is a one-stop solution for left-wing extremism in the country. Moving on to the last topic for the day, which is a term in economics, which is taper tantrum. So what is taper tantrum? Before that, what is quantitative easing? Quantitative easing, many of you must have heard. Otherwise, we'll see what it is. It is a measure, or it is a monetary policy measure which is adopted by the government. Rather, it is adopted by the central bank, which is RBI in India, to increase the money supply. So that is important, which is to increase the money supply. How do we increase the money supply? We buy certain securities from the commercial banks, as well as to increase the lending by commercial banks. So we buy securities from the commercial banks and lend them money, and the banks in turn lends those money to the people, to the end consumers. In fact, RBI, in India's case, RBI, which is a central bank, buys financial assets from the commercial banks and private entities and provides them with adequate liquidity, which increases the consumption by the end users. That is, the banks will provide loans to the consumers, and then there will be an increase in spending. So what is tapering? Tapering is a phrase which belongs to the world of monetary policy again. So it refers to central bank's strategy of winding up a quantitative easing program. So we saw what is a quantitative easing program, which is that the central bank buys financial assets from commercial banks. So winding up the quantitative easing, or rather withdrawing that quantitative easing program, is what is called as tapering. Moving on, we'll finally see what is taper tantrum. So taper tantrum was a famous phenomenon in 2016, where US Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of USA, just like we have Reserve Bank of India for India, US Federal Reserve, which is a central bank for USA, decided to reduce its quantum of bond buying, or rather, they reduced their quantitative easing strategy, which was in place due to the 2007 global financial crisis and the recession which followed it. So what happened when US Federal Reserve reduced its quantitative easing? So there was a lower bond buying, which means that we saw earlier that quantitative easing means we buy more bonds, but then once the US Federal Reserve stopped quantitative easing, it led to lower bond buying, which means we tell something of yield, or which is roughly translated to the interest rate. So once the bond buying reduces, the yields for dollar bonds increases. So once the interest rates or yields for dollar increases, there will be a larger outflow from other countries. Just imagine that in the USA, for dollar bonds, the bond gives, say, 10% interest. But in India, because as we saw, there was lower bond buying, the yields for dollar increases. So it from 5%, it suddenly jumped to 10%. So all the investors will be forced, or they will be more encouraged to invest in dollar bonds rather than invest in bonds of other countries, government securities of other countries. That is what happened in 2016, because there was the US Federal Reserve reduced quantitative easing, and then the yield for dollar increased, and there was a large outflow from other countries, or capital outflow from other countries. It was seen in India as well. In India, foreign institutional investors, which are the foreign investors, withdrew money from bonds and equities, and the value of rupee dipped because there was a large outflow of money from the country to USA. So that is all regarding taper tantrum. It is a common term which is seen in news. There is no need to look too deep into what exactly taper tantrum is, what is the rate at which government securities are being sold. But then it is good to understand it is part of monetary policy measure, and it was a phenomenon which was seen in 2016. So that's all for today's ENbreezEN session. Hope that the session was useful. Thank you all.